Hello, courtroom 3. This is Amber, your staff courtroom manager. I'm here to help with any renaming or tech questions. Feel free to come off mute if you need any help. I am managing 2 courtrooms, so if I'm delayed, just be patient and I'll be right with you. Hello again, courtroom 3. This is Amber. I'm your staff courtroom manager. If anyone needs any help with renaming or any technical questions, I'm here for that. Looks like we have 2 raters, which is what we have planned on, and we're waiting on our presider. Raters, if you have any questions, feel free to come off of mute. That's what this time's for.
I actually do have a question. This is Bridget Merriman. Is there going to be like a pause for us to enter the scores on the digital score sheet? Just want to plan accordingly since I've never dealt with the digital or the remote mock trial.
Yeah, great question. So there'll be time in between witnesses getting on and off screen. We do recommend having a notepad to keep some of your personal notes to give feedback. You have to enter a number score to move forward in the electronic ballot, but the feedback section doesn't have to be as robust. We do ask you to try to put in those notes, but you could do that most of the feedback during oral feedback at the end. And there will be a recess. Usually there's a recess after each side has presented their witnesses and before closing. But if you ever need the judge to slow down or give a pause, you can certainly ask for that.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for volunteering. We appreciate it.
Amber?
Yeah,
Is it?
yeah, this is Amber.
Yeah. I have I wanted to go back into our, what's it called? The roster submission
Oh, okay.
and correct something there.
Yeah, let
But
me.
I submitted it a couple minutes ago and there's an error in it.
Yeah, see if you can refresh now. Usually once I click, once everything's green, I click it to ready. So I just unreleased it. See if you can go in and make that change and let me know if not.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
And you can mute me again can you do that?
Yep. Thanks.
Amber,
Yep, I'm here.
this is men's
Yeah.
Team C. Team C. So I didn't see the new link for that, but I don't need it.
Okay.
It was correct as is.
Perfect.
And then, so Bobby, if you can hear me, you'll see Daoud in the lineup. So that's, just a quick message to my folks here.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, that was it. Daoud will be doing Daoud's role. And Daoud witnesses W-I-T, yeah, no H if you rename that. All right, I think I'm done.
Great. Courtroom 3, I just got in touch with our presiding judge. They will be in here shortly. And we have our 3 raters. So as soon as we have a presider, they will talk with the bailiffs. Everyone does have access to screen share. So if whether your attorneys or your bailiffs are utilizing that, they will have access. And yeah, if there's anything else you need, if there's anything else you need, just please come off mute, and we're here to help. Hello, Your Honor. This is Amber. How are you?
Hello, I'm fine, thank you.
Thanks for being available for us.
No, not at all.
I think both teams are here. You have 2 bailiffs, so if you want to check in with them on their teams. I know it's getting close to 5 o'clock here, but just whenever you're ready. And I will make you a co-host so you can private chat me if you have any questions. Otherwise, you should be good to go.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Before we start, I need to ask a few questions, specifically of the members of the jury. My question is, do any of you have any reason whatsoever to believe that there may be a potential conflict of interest that could call into question your ability to rate this trial impartially? For example, are any of you associated with either of these teams now or in the past? Everyone's muted, so I'm going to assume that with the silence, that there are no conflicts of interest, at least with respect to this round or these teams. Please also keep in mind that video or audio recordings are not allowed without the express permission of both teams. If anyone plans to record any part of this trial, you should speak up now and ask for permission. Okay, again, there being no response, I'll assume no one intends to record this. There should also be no communication whatsoever between any spectator and a competitor until the end of the trial. Let me repeat that again. There should be no communication of any kind, electronic, old-fashioned, by phone, text, any means whatsoever between a spectator and a competitor until the end of the trial. This again includes during any recesses, so please keep that in mind. Are there at this time any administrative or preliminary matters that should be addressed before we start with the pretrial motions?
Your Honor, before preliminary matters, we would like to introduce ourselves.
Please.
Good evening, Your Honor, opposing counsel, and members of the jury. My name is Muna Jelani, and I, along my co-counsels, will now represent the state. My co-counsels will now introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Una Burke, attorney for the prosecution. My pronouns are she, her.
Hello, my name is Paulina Donis, attorney for the prosecution. Our witnesses will now introduce themselves in order of appearance.
Hi, my name is Hava Appleyard, but today I'll be playing Del Hubbard, ex-head groundskeeper in the Barryton Municipal Public Works Department.
Hi, my name is Daoud Mohammed Hassan, and today I will be playing Meryl Green, the mayor of Barryton.
Hi, my name is Veronica Bennell, but today I'll be portraying Detective Jaden Bramberg, lead investigator.
Hello, my name is Dexter Peterson, and today I'll be playing Wesley Everett, citizen of Barryton.
Defense.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Marcus Young, and I, along with my co-counsel, will be representing the defendant, Tracy Whitney. My co-counsel will now introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Kane Yod, and I am an attorney for the defense.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. My name is Glenn Asagood, and I'm an attorney for the defense. Our witnesses will now introduce themselves in order of appearance.
Hello, my name is Owen Odegaard, and I'll be playing Professor Robin Hess.
Hi, my name is Claire Carpita, and I'll be portraying Britt Smithson.
Hello, my name is Kira Smith, and I'll be portraying Aylin Strong.
Good afternoon, my name is Ian Chung, and I will be playing Tracy Whitney.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for those introductions. At this time, does either party have a pretrial motion?
Your Honor, before we begin with pretrial motion, we have some housekeeping matters.
Okay.
The prosecution asked that all participants who are not presenting be muted.
Are there any objections to that by the defense?
No, Your Honor.
All right, so ordered.
Your Honor, the prosecution asked that co-counsel be allowed to share exhibits, screen share exhibits.
All right, defense.
Yes, Your Honor. Regarding exhibits, we'll lay foundation for the omission of exhibits during testimony. When we use Zoom screen share function, the jury will see the exhibits before they have been admitted. By stipulation, all exhibits are authentic and will be admitted into evidence. We ask that the jury be instructed not to consider any exhibits until they've been admitted.
Okay, that will be so ordered.
Your Honor, the prosecution asked that there be a 5 to 10 minute recess in between sides after prosecution rest.
Okay, defense, what's your response?
We agree.
All right, I'll give you 10 minutes recess.
Thank you, Your Honor. The prosecution also asked that time be stopped during objections or any impeachments.
Defense?
Your Honor, it's our understanding of the rules that time will not be stopped for impeachments, but it will be stopped for objections.
I think it's at the discretion of the judge, however, is it not? Okay. So let's see how it goes. If there are lengthy objections or impeachments, then I will step in.
Thank you, Your Honor. We would now like to know a stipulation. No, we would now like to note that all witnesses are viewed as non-sequestered pursuant to Rule 409.
Okay. Defense?
We agree, Your Honor.
All right, so ordered.
Nothing further from prosecution, Your Honor.
Thank you. Does the defense have any housekeeping matters?
Nothing further from the defense, Your Honor.
Okay. At this time then, are there any, does either party have a pretrial motion or motions?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Your Honor. Today we wish that you grant the motion to exclude all evidence of the statements allegedly made by Britt Smithson, leader of the local chapter of DMIT, during a video conference on August 22nd, 2019 with Tracy Whitney, the executive director of DMIT, Wesley Everett, and others. During this video conference, Britt Smithson allegedly made some statements regarding the Australia protest to incite violence. But as we shall see today, Your Honor, Britt Smithson's statements should be excluded as they are inadmissible under the following subparts of Evidence Rule 801D2. Adoptive admissions, representative admissions, co-conspirator statements, and speaking agents. First, these statements do not fall under an adoptive admission because the party does not manifest an adoption or belief in Britt Smithson's statements. While the state may claim that because Tracy Whitney supposedly says, "Thanks for the report, Britt, very interesting," that the defendant manifested a belief in Britt Smithson's statements, the prosecution is leaving out important facts that lack context.
Well, counsel, if I may interrupt, didn't Tracy Whitney also say to that effect during the statement?
Yes. However, in Wesley Everett's own testimony, he stated that there was open mics and everything, so it could have been someone else stating So he wasn't sure that it was actually Tracy Whitney.
Okay, go ahead.
For one, Tracy Whitney stated that he was only half listening to the conference on August 22nd, 2019, because he would have another meeting in 15 minutes. Now, from State v. Hill, deflection means to turn aside, and because Whitney was only half listening, he was deflecting what Britt Smithson had said. According to State v. Hill, deflection is not acquiescence and cannot be taken as a manifestation or adoption of belief.
What are you arguing, counsel, is the deflection or the deflective statement?
From whatever Tracy Whitney said, like, "Thanks for the report, very interesting." That's a deflection and not an acquiescence to Britt Smithson's statements.
Well, but by thanking Britt, isn't he indicating that he agrees with Britt and is supportive of what Britt was saying?
Your Honor, because he was only half listening, he wouldn't have heard what Britt Smithson had said and would just say that just based off of customary sayings.
And how are you getting the belief that he was only half listening?
Because it was stated from Tracy Whitney's testimony and also from Wesley Everett's statement. Tracy Whitney had suffered from Zoom lag or lag on the video call because he was like still the entire time. Also, from Wesley Everett's own testimony, he stated that Tracy Whitney had been listening, but that the defendant was perfectly still. This means that Tracy Whitney could have suffered from lag on the video call, thus making it difficult for Tracy Whitney to hear what Britt Smithson had said. These statements are also not admissible pursuant to a representative's admission because no one authorized Britt Smithson to make statements about the Australia protest on August 22nd, 2019. Britt Smithson was the Barryton group leader and not the Australia group leader. Because of this, Britt Smithson would not be authorized to make statements on behalf of another group. And similarly, these statements are not admissible as a speaking agent because, again, Britt Smithson's statements were not concerning a matter within the scope of the agency. And lastly, Britt Smithson's statements are inadmissible under a co-conspirator statement. Both Tracy Whitney and Britt Smithson in their affidavits explained how the statements about the Australia success were only used as a motivational tool, not to further the conspiracy. From State v. Anderson, the court erred in admitting Stratton's statements to White as a co-conspirator statement, as they are only casual retrospective comments made in conversation about past events. This ruling can be applied to Britt Smithson's statements as they are peaceful and not in furtherance of criminal activity. For the prosecution to prove there is a conspiracy, they will need to prove the existence by a preponderance. And after we hear from our witnesses today, it will be clear that they will not reach that burden. And on top of that, before co-conspirator statements are admitted, there must be an independent determination that a conspiracy existed and that the defendant and Britt Smithson are part of that conspiracy. The state cannot provide independent evidence, and instead they will have to bootstrap. This is because there's no evidence on the record that would make an independent determination that Britt Smithson and Tracy Whitney were involved in the conspiracy. Now, Your Honor, we wish that you grant the motion to exclude all evidence of the statements allegedly made by Britt Smithson on August 22nd, 2019, during a video call with the defendant, Tracy Whitney, Wesley Everett, and others, as the statements are inadmissible under an adopted admission, representative's admission, speaking agent, and co-conspirator statement.
Thank you. Response?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Your Honor. The prosecution requests you allow the testimony of witness Britt Smithson's Australia speech and the testimony of the defendant, Tracy Whitney's response. Tracy Whitney is a leader of the Debunking Mystery Society and today is being charged with criminal conspiracy as well as assault in the second degree. Prior to the protests where the alleged charges took place, Britt Smithson, head of the Barryton chapter of Debunking Mystery, hosted a broadcast, which Tracy Whitney had asked for and was an attendee at. During this broadcast, Britt Smithson brought up another Debunking Mystery protest in Australia, where a statue was destroyed and a groundskeeper was assaulted. Tracy Whitney made no comment. Direct examination of Wesley Everett on the topic of the Australia speech is admissible in today's trial for two reasons. First, under Evidence Rule 801 D2B, it is not hearsay and was admitted by a party opponent against a party and is a manifest adoption of the truth. Second, under Evidence Rule 801 D2E, it is not hearsay and was a statement by a co-conspirator of the party during the course and in furtherance of the conspiracy. Firstly, under Evidence
So
Rule...
what is the independent evidence of the existence of a conspiracy?
Your Honor, the independent evidence is that Wesley Everett and the defendant, Tracy Whitney, conversed over encrypted back channels about the act of property destruction, and then Wesley Everett took a step in furtherance and actually committed property destruction.
Okay.
Permission to continue, Your Honor?
Yes, go ahead.
Firstly, under Evidence Rule 801 D2B, a statement is not hearsay if admitted by a party opponent against a party and is a manifest of which the party has manifested an adoption of the truth. In State v. Neslin, the Washington State Court of Appeals held that when a statement is made in the presence and hearing of an accused that is accusatory or incriminating in character, and such statement is not denied, contradicted, or objected, both the statement and fact of his failure to deny, contradict, or object are admissible in a criminal trial. In our case today, when the destruction of the James Cook statue and assault of a groundskeeper in Australia was mentioned during the broadcast, Tracy Whitney did not deny, contradict, or object. Therefore, the statement is not hearsay and therefore admissible as a manifest adoption of the truth under Evidence Rule 801 D2B.
Counsel, how do you know, based on the Zoom lag, as well as the audio issues, how do you know that Mr. Whitney did not make some sort of protest or negative comment?
Your Honor, no one in court today will testify that Tracy Whitney objected or denied.
Okay. This is an incident that took place in Australia, correct?
Yes.
And Mr. Whitney was not present during that particular protest or demonstration, correct?
Mr. Whitney was present on the broadcast of the protest in Australia.
Yes, but he did not take part in the actual protest in Australia, did he, physically?
No, he didn't, but he was present in a broadcast.
So does not the law also require that the objection, protest, disavowing, or that sort of thing have to be one that you would expect a reasonable person to make such a protestation if they're being accused of or associated with such a horrible event? So here it's as if watching the news, Mr. Whitney did not take part in this. There's no evidence he actually endorsed it. So is there a reasonable expectation that he should have said something or commented to disavow or distance himself from that event?
Yes, Your Honor. Tracy Whitney is the founder of Debunking Mystery and has, you will hear today in testimony, that has spent a lot of time organizing the website and materials that Debunking Myth Story members use, and checks in with all of the different affiliates in all the countries and states, and is partially involved in organizing Debunking Myth Story.
Do you acknowledge that he did say, according to the discovery, or something to that effect?
Yes, Your Honor.
Could that have been a no, like say, I disagree with that, or that should not have happened?
Your Honor, seeing as what was brought up, there was nothing casual about it. It would be more expected that the defendant would make a clear statement of objecting to, rather than that could be interpreted either way. Permission to continue, Your Honor?
Yes, please. And I'm going to give you an extra 30 seconds because I did interrupt quite a bit.
Thank you, Your Honor. Secondly, Evidence Rule 801 D2E excludes from the hearsay definition any statement by a co-conspirator of the party during the course and in furtherance of the conspiracy. Now, you'll hear today from Wesley Everett that the defendant, Tracy Whitney, and Wesley Everett had an agreement to engage in the legal act of property destruction. This goes to show that the conspiracy present in today's case. In State v. Israel, the Washington State Court of Appeals defined in furtherance as statements or boasts made by a declarant to keep co-conspirators advised and involved in the conspiracy. The declarant in today's case is Britt Smithson, who boasts about the Australia success during a broadcast in order to inspire members involved in the conspiracy. And lastly, Evidence Rule 801 D2E is applied in State v. Anderson. The Washington State Court of Appeals states that Washington adheres to the principle that statements and acts of co-conspirators are admissible after the state has established a prima facie case made out of evidence independent of the proposed hearsay. The statement must be made during the course and in furtherance of the conspiracy. In today's case, there will be other evidence to support the conspiracy that is not hearsay. You'll hear about encrypted back channels that discussed illegal property destruction and how the defendant conveniently disposed of the computers that held these conversations. Because this meets the definition of in furtherance as defined in State v. Anderson, the statement is therefore not hearsay and thus admissible under Evidence Rule 801 D2E. For all these reasons, the prosecution requests that you allow the testimony of the Australia event and Tracy Whitney's response when it was brought up during the broadcast and deny the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, defense, do you have a rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor. Opposing counsel brought up State v. Nesland. So first for Nesland, we must remember that silence does not constitute an adoptive admission because, first of all, Whitney did not hear the accusatory statements or did not hear the statements because of lag that Wesley Everett even noted in his testimony, and also that Tracy Whitney was only half listening. And more importantly, Britt Smithson did not say anything accusing the defendant, and therefore there would be no reason for Tracy Whitney to respond. Now, also, opposing counsel brought up how Tracy Whitney and Wesley Everett conversed through back channels. However, the opposing counsel never brought up Britt Smithson and made an independent determination that she was part of the conspiracy. And because she was the declarant, she must be part of the conspiracy, and opposing counsel did not make a determination of that. And also from Britt Smithson's statements are just casual retrospective statements by definition because they look into the past and therefore they aren't looking into the future. And therefore a pep talk to motivate peacefully is not in furtherance. We hear from Detective Jaden Brandberg, who was recruited to the Drug Enforcement Administration and is currently the major crimes lead detective for the Barryton Police Department. In his statement, he interviewed DMIT members and none of them had ever heard any discussion of violent behavior or damaging property.
Now, counsel, isn't Ms. Smithson's involvement in this conference and this debriefing after each protest independent evidence of her own involvement in a conspiracy? And it's only a prima facie showing. The opposing side doesn't have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the declarant is involved in a conspiracy, only that there's a prima facie showing.
They must prove by a preponderance, and could you repeat what you said?
Yeah, doesn't Ms. Smithson's participation in this conference, which is, and also basically the meeting isn't it a debriefing of sorts that following every protest or demonstration, they have this get together and they talk about what happened and they talk about next steps. So that gathering of this group to talk about these and plan the next event, isn't that a conspiracy?
No, because it doesn't necessarily incite criminal activity. And there has to be criminal activity and in furtherance to show that there's a conspiracy to do bad things. And from Jaden Bramberg's own statement, there was the DMIT members never heard any discussion of violent behavior or damaging property, and therefore.
Well, doesn't Smithson's endorsement of what happened during the Australia protest, isn't that a encouragement of violent behavior? Because Smithson talked about how the group pummeled the groundskeeper, and Smithson said, that's what we need here. Isn't that a sort of call to arms?
No, he was more focused on the success and not the techniques used. And also that would not be independent evidence, because that is the conference that the pre-trial is based on. So you could not use that evidence to prove that Britt Smithson was part of the conspiracy. Also, in State v. Israel, it states that statements relating past events are admissible under the co-conspiratorial rule as long as they facilitate the criminal activity of the conspiracy. But nowhere in Britt Smithson's or Tracy Whitney's statements about the August 22nd, 2019 meeting mention incitement of criminal activity. While Britt Smithson does use Australia as a motivational tool, it should not be used to imply criminal activity because a motivational tool is too vague. For one, you could use a motivational tool to get better grades in school, and that is still not criminal activity. A motivational tool is not in furtherance.
Counsel, that's your characterization of what transpired, that it's a motivational tool. But I just want to point out to you the statement that Smithson said, describing the pummeling. She said, that's what we need here. If the council won't take down the blockhouse, we knock it down. If Grimm's minions get in our way, shove them out of the way. Who has that spirit here? Wesley, are you ready to go? Doesn't that discuss actually a couple of criminal activities? One would be destruction of property by tearing down the blockhouse, for example, or knocking it down. And then if people get in the way, to physically shove them out of the way, which is a call to assault people. Aren't those at least two criminal acts that Britt Smithson is encouraging people to participate in?
Well, because that was from Wesley Everett's testimony, and he's under a plea deal, the only person under a plea deal, that of course he would say that, oh, it was used to like incite violence. However, from both Britt Smithson and Wesley and Tracy Whitney's testimony, it was only about the results achieved and not like the method used.
I'll give you an extra 30 seconds too, because I did take up some of your time. So if you want to wrap up.
Oh, nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any rebuttal?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, the defense has brought up State v. Neslins and said that Tracy Whitney's silence could have been due to lag. However, you cannot be certain that the lag happened at the exact same time that Britt Smithson was saying these incriminating statements, which leads to the next point, that the defense said that the statements were not accusatory and therefore silence would be expected. However, these statements were incriminating. The Australia protest involved property destruction and assault, which is what Tracy Whitney is being charged with today. Furthermore, the defense argued that there was no evidence that Britt Smithson was a co-conspirator. However, under Evidence Rule 801 D2E, a statement is not hearsay if made by a co-conspirator. Now that we have established the conspiracy in today's case, we can discuss Britt Smithson's role as a co-conspirator. You'll hear today that Britt Smithson held meetings with select members of Debunking This Story after the main group meetings. Wesley Everett, a known conspirator, attended these meetings. In addition, Britt Smithson was the one to put Wesley Everett and Tracy Whitney, who are both involved in the conspiracy, in touch with each other. Not to mention that Britt Smithson was the one to make the inspirational Australia speech where assault and property damages took place. Britt Smithson made this speech on a broadcast that both Everett and Whitney were a part of, a private broadcast that you could only attend if Britt Smithson allows you in. For all these reasons, examination on Britt Smithson's statement is admissible under Evidence Rule 801 D2E. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, counsel. Okay, based on the evidence and the pleadings, as well as your arguments, the court is going to find that the statements made by Britt Smithson during that August conference are admissible. The court is satisfied that the state has established a prima facie case made out by evidence independent of the hearsay that the conspiracy existed at the time the statements were made. More importantly, that the evidence does establish that there is a connection of both the declarant and the defendant to the conspiracy. Now, I'm going to allow both sides, depending on how the evidence develops during testimony, I will likely allow both sides free rein to argue what all of these statements mean and the context of the statements, because I think they are subject to interpretation to a large degree. All right, is there anything else by either party, or are we ready to proceed to openings? Okay, I will take the silence as there being no other preliminary motions. Is the state ready to give its opening?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
A puppet master always puts on a good show. In fact, throughout the days, weeks, and even months leading up to the event of September 16th, 2019, Tracy Whitney pulled the strings for their performance, destroying the Alton Berry statue in Barryton, Washington. Tracy Whitney is the founder of the Debunking Myth Story organization, also known as DMYT. With over 38 global chapters, the aim of their organization is to remove all statues in every city of the world. Today, our focus is on the Barryton chapter of DMYT. You may hear today that Tracy Whitney has never set foot in Washington state before this trial, and you may be asking, how did they pull this off? And the answer to that is by manipulating their puppets, Britt Smithson and Wesley Everett, active members of DMYT and residents of Barryton. Tracy Whitney entered the Barryton community with a plan. 1, to spread their truth about history. 2, to garner civic engagement from their followers. And 3, to abuse the momentum their followers had built in order to fulfill their end goal of destroying the statue. In April of 2019, Tracy Whitney had initiated the civic action phase of their plan. In fact, they had provided Britt Smithson and the Barryton chapter of DMYT a demand letter to pose to the city council to remove the Alton Berry statue. This went on for months, an endless onslaught of emails, letters, and demands. But their words alone were not nearly enough to gain any traction from the city council. Come August, and with minimal progress on their goal, they had decided it was time to take it a step further, an imminent and violent one at that, the very reason we are at this trial today. That was when Tracy Whitney ramps up their messaging to the Barryton DMYT chapter. This was even after they knew previous activities in other cities caused injuries and turned violent. Members like Britt Smithson and Wesley Everett have communicated with the defendant multiple times through encrypted chat rooms, invite-only video conferences, email, and through the DMYT website. In fact, many of these exchanges took place throughout the multiple protests Britt Smithson led alongside DMYT over the summer. These protests often consisted of speeches and loud demands aimed at the city council, but many can affirm that the final protest on September 16th was different from the rest. But where does Tracy Whitney come into play, you may ask? Truth of the matter is, they orchestrated and supervised the violence that took place at the protest. With cell phones and tablets in the hands of those at the event, Tracy Whitney was on the receiving end of their broadcasts. After months of having their requests denied, people at the rally were riled up, especially Tracy Whitney. Witness Wesley Everett was one of whom was assigned to live stream by Britt Smithson. That was until Tracy Whitney screamed energetic tango through the live stream, and that was the sign for Mr. Everett to step up. Members of the jury, you will hear Detective Jaden Brandberg, specialist in deciphering coded language, explain how terms like energetic tango are classic examples of words used by similar organizations to incite violence. When Mr. Everett heard those words, he knew Tracy expected him to commit a violent act against the statue immediately. So Mr. Everett jumped through the crowd, grabbed a nearby sledgehammer, and hit the arm of the statue until it broke off, just as Tracy Whitney had planned. But to Mr. Everett's surprise, the arm had fallen on Dell Hubbard, Barryton municipal worker. However, such aggressive and violent conduct was not a surprise to Britt Smithson nor Tracy Whitney. Today, you'll hear about the traumatic injuries Dell Hubbard sustained on September 16, 2019. Ms. Hubbard was a hardworking groundskeeper for the city of Barryton. That was until September 16th, where she faced a multitude of injuries, physical, mental, and emotional. You'll also hear how Mr. Everett became so inspired to commit these crimes. And the answer to that is Tracy Whitney. Britt led the rally and Wesley did the physical crime. However, these are all products of Tracy Whitney's plan. What happened on September 16th fit the goals of Tracy Whitney's debunking with Thori organization. If Tracy Whitney did not plan to harm people on September 16th, then Tracy Whitney would have taken many steps to ensure crimes would not happen because of demit. But Tracy Whitney did none of that. Tracy Whitney was the encourager-in-chief on September 16th. Members of the jury, by the end of this trial, we ask you to find Tracy Whitney to be held legally accountable. Thank you.
Thank you. Will the defense be giving an opening?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, you may proceed.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is a case that began on September 16th, 2019, when Dell Hubbard, a groundskeeper, was gravely injured because of the actions of a person named Wesley Everett. At the end of this trial, you will hear that Wesley Everett did go rogue. Tracy Whitney, the defendant, is president of Debunking Mystery, a group that rallies for the removal of statues as they glorify the misuse of power. In Barryton, they were focused on removing the statue of Alton Berry, the town's founder. And while you've heard that Tracy Whitney is being charged with the damage to the statue and the injuries of Dell Hubbard, you will discover, as the prosecution has explained, that Whitney was thousands of miles away. Whitney is the founder of Debunking Mystery, and his organization has expanded throughout the years. As the prosecution has also said, there are over 100 chapters worldwide, with 38 in the US and in 10 countries. But, as they failed to mention, because of the many affiliates, most of the details of the chapter are not run through Whitney, and are instead handled by the local chapter leader, who in this case is Britt Smithson. Smithson, who runs a local construction company, will tell you that she is a chapter leader in Barryton and that her group acted independently. She also was completely surprised by the actions of Wesley Everett. Everett, the person who actually damaged the Alton Berry statue and injured Dell Hubbard, was a member of DMIT and worked in the same chapter as Smithson. We will hear them both testify about the events leading up to September 16th and what exactly happened that day. September 16th began with a rally at the statue of Alton Berry and protests against the city council for leaving the statue in the plaza, despite the many concerns against it. This was the fifth gathering that summer where there was a crowd of people, the most important being Wesley Everett and Britt Smithson. You will hear that Wesley Everett, who was not scheduled to speak that day, went rogue, jumped up next to the statue, and gave a speech that riled up the angry crowd. Others had a chance to speak, but Everett, acting alone, suddenly attacked the statue of Alton Berry with a sledgehammer. This hammer ended up striking the statue, and Dell Hubbard was injured in the process. These were the actions of Wesley Everett. Aylin Strong, a reporter who will also testify today, only saw Everett climb up to destroy the statue. She will tell you it was only Everett who acted out at this protest. It was only Everett who reacted to Whitney's so-called signal, despite the multiple DMIT members present that drove them to damage the statue. Ms. Strong will also testify that Smithson looked surprised that Wesley acted rogue. The prosecution wants you to believe that Tracy Whitney, leader of DMIT, was involved in this. But, as Whitney will tell you today, he was thousands of miles away from Barryton and isn't even in charge of the chapter. Tracy Whitney will also tell you that he does not support Everett's decision to become violent and was actively against it. Everett has pleaded guilty to the charges of malicious mischief in the first degree and 1 count of reckless endangerment, but will tell you that they have not been yet sentenced and that their sentence depends on what happens during this trial. Whitney is being charged with conspiracy and malicious mischief, even though he is not responsible for the actions of Everett. Listen carefully. This conspiracy involved a signal that only Everett knew, and only Everett claims to have heard. You will hear that Wesley Everett went rogue. We will also hear many claims stating that DMIT urged Everett to take down the statue through emails and messages. But all of Tracy Whitney's words are protected free speech under the First Amendment. The standard used to determine whether speech qualifies as free speech is called the Brandenburg test. Robin Hess, an expert in social and legal studies, will explain the Brandenburg test and apply it to Tracy Whitney's words and writing. The defense of my co-counsel, Ms. Yod, will prove that the defendant, Tracy Whitney, did not commit these crimes. We ask that the jury hears all the evidence and returns a verdict of not guilty. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. All right, State, if you're ready for your first witness, please call your first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution now calls Del Hubbard to the stand. Please introduce yourself to the court.
Hi, everyone. My name is Del Hubbard. I was the head groundskeeper in the Barryton Municipal Public Works Department for quite some time.
And why are you here today, Ms. Hubbard?
Me? I'm the one who was hit in the head with the sledgehammer. I want to spread the real truth about what happened to me. 1 second, I was doing a job I loved. Then the next, I woke up in a hospital, was put in physical therapy, and I had to file for disability.
We'll get back to that later. First, what do you enjoy about your work?
Objective relevance.
It's background, I'll allow it.
I always knew I didn't want to work in an office. Physical labor is more satisfying anyway. There's nothing more rewarding than keeping the downtown plaza clean. But it's not just physical labor. You need to have your fair share of planning, landscape design, and construction skills. We work hard. We're not just driving lawnmowers in circles. I'm lucky to be able to say that I had a job I enjoyed.
Now, along with that work, you also worked on the Alton Berry statue. Is that correct?
Yes, I took pride in keeping it shining. It might have been old, but I still tended to it like it was brand new. It's been around long enough to have its arm knocked off 3 times, poor guy. The last time by some weirdo in the 90s. It was reattached by a professional metal sculptor, and it's been sturdy as a rock ever since.
Ms. Hubbard, do you know anything about Alton Berry?
Honestly, no. I'm aware that there's controversy around him, but I never cared enough to research. Barry and I were just a work thing. The public definitely seemed to have their complaints, though, with like the mayor and the statue, but I stayed in my own lane.
What types of complaints did the public have?
Oh, the cost and things. I guess some of them thought that tax dollars could be used in better ways than an old statue.
Now, you mentioned you clean the downtown plaza. Is that correct?
Yes, my team and I would regularly clean the downtown plaza to get rid of the litter, dirt, and the occasional graffiti. That's actually why we were at the Debunking Myth Story protest in the first place.
How many protests took place?
5. I was only there at the last 3, though. My team got called in to clean when the trash started piling up.
And what was the crowd like?
Well, there were several hundred people there. Things started picking up speed towards the end of the 4th protest when Mayor Grimm showed up and was shouted down by the crowd. But the 5th protest is when it got out of hand.
What do you mean by got out of hand?
There were less people there than at the other protests, and those that were there had a different energy than before. I also didn't recognize a lot of them. the last thing I was expecting was to get my brains bashed in by a sledgehammer.
What happened before you were assaulted?
Well,
Objection. The word assaulted invades the promise of the jury. Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Sustained. Counsel re-ask or a different question. Or
Ms. Hubbard,
question, I should say, counsel.
Ms. Hubbard, what happened before you were hit over the head with a sledgehammer?
well, my team and I just stood there ready to clean if necessary. Smithson and Everett were speaking a lot, and everyone seemed to have their phone out, recording or broadcasting or something. I heard someone yelling through a tablet, talking about a blockhouse falling down or something about tangoing.
Did you sustain any injuries?
First, the arm of the statue fell on my left shoulder, fractured my scapula, and broke my collarbone in 3 different places. Then something, I've been told it was a sledgehammer, was driven into my skull. Not only did the sledgehammer shatter my skull, it shattered my life. I'll never be able to work again.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, on September 16, 2019, you were working at the plaza.
Yes, I got called in to clean with my team when the trash started piling up at the other protests.
You worked there fairly often.
Yes, we're always there to clean up the litter, trash, occasionally graffiti.
In fact, as you said before, this was your 3rd gathering of that type that you had witnessed that summer.
Yes.
So there have been similar protests in the past, is that correct?
Yes, there had been 2 previous ones, but I wasn't at them.
And those gatherings beforehand, though, they had always been peaceful.
Yes, from what I saw. Maybe not saw, heard from, anyway. Quite some trash,
So that's
though.
a yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
That's a yes, Miss Hubbard?
Yes, but I wasn't there, so, but from what I heard, yes.
Miss Hubbard, you know who Wesley Everett is?
Yes.
The main speaker at this event on the 16th was Everett, was it not?
And Britt Smithson.
You don't recall Everett speaking before the 16th, do you, Miss Hubbard?
Not at the other protests that I was at, but Smithson spoke at them and Everett was definitely there.
His speeches were trying to work people up, weren't they?
Yes, along with Britt Smithson's. The crowd seemed to be in like a frenzy.
Now, during the protest, many people were holding phones and tablets.
Yes.
And you saw many people listening to something on these devices, didn't you?
Yes, a broadcast or a live stream or something.
But it was too hard for you to understand clearly, wasn't it?
Something about tangoing or House of Cards, Blockhouse. They might have been able to hear it though. I wasn't really paying
You said
too
it could
much.
have been more than one voice.
Yes, but
You don't believe you were just hearing feedback, Miss Hubbard.
no, I was definitely not just hearing feedback. I heard people talking.
That's your statement here today, that you didn't know if you were just hearing feedback.
No, I wasn't, sorry, let me restart. I didn't know anything for certain, but I'm pretty sure that I heard people talking, something about a blockhouse, tangoing.
The speakers at the rally, Smithson and Everett, you said were extremely loud, correct?
Yes, well, way too loud for my taste. I'm more of a quiet person.
These speakers, Miss Hubbard, were so loud that you said you doubt if they or anyone else present could hear the voice or voices on the device.
They might have been able to. I couldn't hear anything too clearly because I didn't have a phone out. I wasn't connected to the broadcast, but they might have been able to if they had their phone.
Is that a yes, Miss Hubbard?
Yes, nothing for certain, but I'm pretty sure.
Switching focus, you're familiar with Tracy Whitney.
Yes.
Throughout the rally, Whitney wasn't ever physically present, was he?
No.
The people you saw leading the event were Smithson and Everett, not Whitney, correct?
Apparently, Whitney was through the phone. Whitney was the one I heard speaking, apparently.
Whitney didn't give any speeches, did he?
No, Britt Smithson and Wesley Everett were the designated speakers at the event.
Whitney didn't hand Everett the sledgehammer, did he?
No.
Whitney didn't hit the statue, did he?
No, he did not.
Whitney didn't hit you, did he?
No, it was Wesley Everett who dropped the statue on my head, but I'm not so sure. I don't believe that Wesley Everett was acting alone.
Whitney wasn't there at all, was he?
No, only virtually.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Hubbard, what did you think that you heard on the broadcast of the fifth protest?
Objection, hearsay.
Let's call for hearsay.
Your Honor, under evidence rule 701, this is an interpretation reasonably based on this witness's perception and therefore admissible.
Okay, I'll allow it for now. Let's see what.
Ms. Hubbard, I'll re-ask the question. What did you think that you heard on the broadcast at the fifth protest?
Something about a blockhouse falling down, house of cards, tangoing, that sort of thing.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Defense, do you have any limited recross?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. May this witness be excused? Okay, I assume yes. So, State, you may call your next witness.
Your Honor, the state now calls Meryl Grimm to the stand.
All right.
Hello, please introduce yourself to the court.
Good evening. My name is Meryl Grimm. I'm the mayor of Barryton.
How long have you been the mayor of Barrington?
Well, I have been the mayor for about right now 8 years.
What do you do as mayor?
As mayor, I work to emphasize the three pillars of my administration: pride in our town past, commitment to its past, and hope for its future.
How are you honoring your town's past?
Our beloved founder of Barryton, my great-grandfather, Alton Bell, who established our reputation as a city of industry and prosperity, was honored by a statue gifted to the city. I work to take care of this statue.
How is the statue being taken care of?
Well, with the help of the citizen and the member of City Council, we passed a bond in 2017, and this bond is to help and improve our parks and open areas, which are being paid for by tax dollars. And a small portion of the bond goes to Alton Perry statue.
Your Honor, I'm facing technical difficulties here. I'm not allowed to, I can't share my screen. I asked that time be stopped.
Yes, I'll grant that, and hopefully host or someone will be able to help you. There you go.
Your Honor,
yes.
We're not sharing exhibits now. It's just my screen isn't working. I can't show my face. There's some technical difficulties. It says you cannot start your video because the host has disabled it.
All right. So hopefully, if the host is listening, I would ask that council be allowed to resume the video.
Yeah, this is the staff courtroom manager. I haven't touched any settings. So if there's someone in the Zoom room that is has co-host privilege and is accidentally pushing any buttons and participants, we ask you to close that window. I will do my best to get video started on my end. Thank you.
My video starting now. Thank you.
It's resumed.
Thank you. I would like to re-ask the question.
Yes, you may.
How is the statue being taken care of?
Well, with the help of citizen and the member of the city council, we passed a bond in 2017. This bond is to help and improve parks and open areas which are being paid by tax dollars. And a small portion of the bond goes to Alton Berry's statue.
How did the public react to this?
The majority of the people were happy, but you know how it is. There are always few to complain about whatever you are doing. There were no more than 2 or 3 disagreements when it comes to the statue. one being Britt Simpson himself.
How did you respond to Britt Smithson?
Usually I'm so glad to hear what the people have to say, but this time I was taken aback. I didn't know where this anger was coming from, as Britt had never seemed to have an issue before.
What did Britt Smithson say?
Well, Britt brought up Tracy Whitney and an organization called Debunking Mystery and an issue they had with Alton Berry, then proceeds to hand me a letter.
Your Honor, I am now displaying, my co-counsel will now be displaying what has been previously marked as Exhibit 6. Do you recognize this?
Yes, this is a letter Britt Simpson gave me.
And is it a fair
Objection.
What's the basis?
Lack of foundation. Opposing counsel has not laid foundation for this letter.
Your Honor, if co-counsels let me, I will be laying foundation for this letter in a second.
All right, please go ahead.
Do you recognize this?
Yes.
And is it a fair and accurate representation of this?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm now asking that this letter be admitted into evidence.
Objection at this time, defense?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, it will be admitted.
Mr. Mayor, can you describe what this letter is?
Yes, Britt presented to me this letter, and the letter was very demanding and clearly implied that if the letter's requests were not met immediately, something terrible will happen to Berryton.
And can you read the second to last line of this letter?
Yes, immediate compliance will avoid any unpleasant consequences for Berryton, its facilities, and its employees.
And whose signature is at the bottom of this letter?
Tracy Whitney.
Did Britt Smithson say anything while handing you this letter?
Yes, Britt said, don't say that Tracy Whitney didn't warn you. The group walked away, slamming doors and tipping over chairs as they left. This was the beginning of the harassment, both public and private.
How did the harassment progress?
The Demit group never slowed down. In fact, as time wore on, the emails began to get darker and more alarming, threatening all through summer. These emails were always signed by either Britt Simpson or Tracy Whitney.
Was there any other form of harassment?
My Facebook was full of hate speech, and I got calls day and night, anonymous stress on the other line. The calls started when Whitney became involved in the calls and stopped when Whitney called off the dogs after Simpson press conference.
Thank you, Mayor. I would now like to turn your attention to the protest. Did you ever attend any protest?
Well, because Britt and I had worked together in the past, I decided it would be best to attend the fourth protest in August, just to talk and possibly come to some sort of mutual agreement.
And how did this go?
Frankly, it was a waste of time.
Do you remember anything significant from that protest?
They recited some speeches. What stuck out to me was that after every single speech they made, they will all shout Energetica Tango, pumping their fists in the air.
Was this the only protest you attended?
Yes, I was in my office during the fifth protest and didn't come outside until after the wall incident.
Did you see anything when you left your office?
I saw they'll have a lion on the ground, bleeding. Wesley Everett appeared to be in police custody, and I was surprised that Britt was out of sight.
And do you have any idea of the expenses caused that day?
Well, the city has estimated that the price of the restorations of Alton's Berry statue will be over $10,000.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Mayor Grimm, the first time you ever heard of DMIT was in April 2019, correct?
Correct.
But you had received complaints against the Alton Berry statue before that?
Yes.
And these affairs were mostly orchestrated by Britt Smithson, isn't that right?
Britt Simpson. Yes.
And Tracy Whitney was not at the city council meetings, was he?
Tracy Whitney, as long as I know, Tracy Whitney wasn't there, but the limit people were at the meeting, and as I know, they were representing Tracy Whitney.
But Tracy Whitney was not physically at that protest himself, was he?
No, he wasn't.
And even after Debunking Mystery got involved, Tracy Whitney was never directly involved with the statue, correct?
Can you repeat that question?
Even after Debunking Mystery got involved, Tracy Whitney was never involved directly with the statue, correct?
Correct.
Mayor Grimm, the person you saw mostly in charge with these concerns was Britt Smithson.
Yes.
Britt Smithson was even the one who scheduled the meeting with you.
Yeah, he's the one who scheduled the meeting. Yeah.
That Wesley Everett was not at that meeting, correct?
Yeah, as I know, Wesley Everett was not at the meeting, and the limit people and four other people that were there at the meeting, and Britt Simpson himself was there.
And during this meeting, you were handed a letter.
Yes, a letter was handed to me by Britt Simpson.
And this letter was the first time you ever heard of Tracy Whitney.
Yes, that's correct.
But the only connection that this letter has to Whitney is that it's signed by him. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And this letter was also the only form of communication you had received from the defendant, correct?
Correct, yes.
You had never saw Whitney in person.
Yes, I have not seen or contacted with Tracy Whitney.
That was the only form of communication. Oh, wait, never mind. Other than that letter, you don't know much about Tracy Whitney, do you, Mayor Grimm?
No, I have no connection with Tracy Whitney.
Well, after this meeting, you were being harassed.
Yeah, yes, I was being harassed, yes.
But you do not know whether the defendant was directly involved with this harassment, correct?
I'll come again.
You do not know whether the defendant was directly involved with this harassment, correct?
Based on the evidence that I saw and the thing that I know about the myth and I know that the myth is being in charge of Tracy Whitney. And I can say based on that is when Simpson told me that, Tracy, he said a word that, don't say that Tracy didn't warn you. Based on that, I have came to a conclusion that Tracy Whitney is the person that's in charge of that place. So, yes.
But that was not my question. My question is that you do not know whether the defendant was directly involved with the harassment that you had received, correct?
Objection asked and answered. At the end of this witness's testimony, they said yes.
Sustained.
I can move on. And even the emails you had received were not exclusively from Whitney, correct?
Based on what I know, the emails was either signed by Britt Simpson or Tracy Whitney.
Moving on to the protests, you attended one, correct?
Yeah, I attended on the fourth protest.
And during this protest, you noted that Tracy was outspoken and rough.
Yes.
And you were there during the city council meeting where DMIT's proposal was rejected, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
You also noted that there was an angry crowd with Everett in it, didn't you?
And come again?
And during the city council meeting where DMIT's proposal was rejected, you noted that there was an angry crowd with Everett in it. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's right.
Whitney was not in that crowd, was he?
Whitney was not there.
Mayor Grimm, you also was not at the protest on September 16th, were you?
I was not physically, I was in my office at that right moment. But when after the incident, I saw a couple of things. I saw Del Hubbard lying on the ground bleeding.
But you were not there at the protest on September 16th.
As I have
Yes,
said,
Your Honor,
I
asked and
was
answered.
The
The
same.
witness, Your Honor, the witness has not answered the question in a correct or yes or no answer. They have just explained what they saw on September 16th and instead of giving me an answer.
Why
Your
don't
Honor,
you
may I
re-ask?
respond?
Yes, you may.
The witness has testified that they were in their office during the protest, so they did answer counsel's question.
Counsel, you may not have liked the answer, but I believe the witness did answer your question. It's just not in the way that you were hoping for the answer, I think.
Yes, Your Honor. You cannot moving on. You cannot accurately testify about what happened on September 16th. Can you, Mayor Graham?
As I have said, based on what I saw after the incident, I will probably say, yeah, I can justify.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Mayor Graham, you were given a letter. Who signed this letter?
Tracy Whitney signed the letter.
And in your personal opinion, what is the letter implying?
The letter is implying an immediate removal of the statue of Alton's Berry.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Do you have any recross defense?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. State, please call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The state now calls Detective Jaden Bramberg to the stand. Good evening. Please introduce yourself to the court.
Hi, everyone. My name is Detective Jaden Bramberg.
What is your current occupation?
I am a lead investigating officer for the Major Crimes Unit at Barrington Municipal Police Department.
How long have you been in law enforcement?
For almost 20 years now. Time flies when you're an investigator.
And when did your law enforcement career begin?
Well, it all began in Jacksonville, Illinois, when I obtained a criminal justice degree. For 3 years, I worked as a general officer, then joined an elite unit of the Federal Drug Enforcement Agency.
What did you do as part of this unit?
For 6 years, I was trained to listen for and decipher coded language that drug traffickers would use when speaking with customers and suppliers. But after a while, I decided it was time to move on, so I left.
Why did you leave?
I just wanted a change of view, and I was more interested.
All right, counsel, what was your objection?
To relevance.
It is starting to get irrelevant. Is there any relevance to all of this background?
No, Your Honor. I'm simply just laying foundation for this expert witness.
Okay, but please move on. I think there's been testimony about drug expertise and that sort of thing, and I don't believe that's applicable in this case.
Of course, Your Honor. I'll move on to my next question. And how are you connected to today's case?
Well, I'm leading the investigation in today's case. I was called to go to the scene of the crime on September 16, 2019.
What did you do upon arrival at the scene?
The security officers at the event had Wesley Everett in custody, and a reporter was still present. I asked security to block certain areas where the event happened and to take measurements of the distances between possible items of evidence prior to the removal and packaging.
Did you find any possible evidence?
I found the sledgehammer that was used to damage the statue and hit Del Hubbard's head. I took it into evidence and made a digital copy of it. After, I then swabbed the hammer for DNA and dusted it for fingerprints.
Did you speak with anyone at the scene?
I spoke to the reporter I mentioned earlier, Aylin Strong. They told me that they saw someone hand Wesley Everett the sledgehammer. Then they showed me a video.
Can you make anything out from this video?
Unfortunately, I couldn't because the video is so blurry and out of focus. So I tried to speak with Del Hubbard afterwards.
And were you able to speak with Dell?
She was still in surgery, but I did ask staff to give me a full report on her injuries and clothing when it was ready.
Thank you, Detective. I would now like to turn your attention to Wesley Everett. Did you ever speak with Wesley?
I sure did. I tried to talk to him back at the station, but his only response was something along the lines of, "You need to knock down the blockhouse."
Was there a second time you spoke with Everett?
Yes, the second time was after Rich Smithson held a press conference about September 16, claiming that they weren't associated with Wesley Everett. That's when Everett demanded to speak with me. Seemed like he wanted to clear his name or something.
So what did you do next?
I began looking into who really was behind the attack. To be honest, my team and I couldn't find any of the inner circle Everett described. So I did some background information on the group Debunking Mystery.
And were you able to find anything?
I found out that each time the chapters of the organization will call for statue removal, statues would be damaged during a rally, and guards would be injured as well.
What did you do next in your investigation?
I obtained search warrants for the records of the company Everett said Smithson and others used to communicate with the defendant.
Did anything helpful come from this?
Yes, actually, I found a few significant messages of these communications. I also copied a few portions of the public website Whitney used to communicate with DMET, as well as emails between Tracy Whitney and Wesley Everett.
What did you find with these messages?
Now, this is where my training with the DAA came in handy. These messages in coded language were a way to communicate with the members of DMET. So when people in the organization see these messages, they know the true meaning behind them.
Did you find the true meaning behind them?
Yes, I analyzed the documents made by Whitney. I first looked for phrases and concepts that were commonly used within the group by interviewing Wesley Everett and other members in different chapters.
What did you do next?
I then scanned to see if there were times Everett would try to avoid using the same phrases or symbols relating to the group. I was also aware that the group is greatly interested in myth and history, so this told me that the codes could be interpreted through these lenses.
And what were the coded languages being used?
The coded languages I discovered were Baby House of Blocks and Energetic Tango. But these weren't the true meaning behind these phrases.
What was the true meaning behind those phrases?
In my professional opinion, the true meaning behind Baby House is knocked down, and Blockhouse means invaded and destroyed. Energetic Tango is used to signal to the group that their next steps were going to be violent and near.
Based on your findings, did you come up with any conclusion?
Yes, in my expert opinion, Tracy Whitney attempted to communicate the need for direct and violent actions to the members of DMET through coded language.
Thank you, Honor. No further questions.
Examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Detective Ramberg, let's first talk about deciphering Tracy Whitney's code. In this case, you analyzed various documents created by Tracy Whitney using several methods.
Correct.
First, the phrase "baby house of blocks" or a blockhouse was a reference to Thoreau's essay, Civil Disobedience, right?
Yes, it was.
And Thoreau used the phrase in a discussion of nonviolent civil disobedience, isn't that right?
They wanted to throw in a nonviolent phrase to hide the true meaning behind their phrase, yes.
Yes, according to you, Whitney changed the phrasing of Thoreau's line, right?
A subtle change.
Mm-hmm. By adding like knocked down and invaded and destroyed.
Yes, that's true.
And you believe these changes in terminology allowed Whitney to profess a pure motive while subtly signaling his followers to act?
Based on my background investigation, yes.
But on September 16th, 2019, Wesley Everett was the only person who damaged the statue, right?
That is right.
And you said that deciphering code required subjective analysis, isn't that so?
Yes.
And that oftentimes the way code is deciphered is also misunderstood?
There can be a possibility, but based on my findings, I knew that Tracy Whitney was trying to communicate the need for violent action through coded language.
So that is a yes, right?
Yes.
Okay. You deciphered the phrase energetic tango, right?
Yes.
You believed it was used to incite violence?
Yes, I did.
And you determined this because Energetic Tango sounded similar to the movie Break Into Electric Boogaloo?
Well, based on my analysis, I found that it was a signal to the group that there was a need for direct violent action.
So that's a yes, right?
Yes.
But you don't know if Tracy Whitney has watched this movie, right?
Not to my knowledge.
Or if Britt Smithson has, right?
Like I said, not to my knowledge.
In fact, you don't know if anyone in the DMIT organization has watched Break Into Electric Boogaloo.
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of personal knowledge.
Exactly. That was my question.
Well, why don't you re-ask it or rephrase the question to demonstrate that?
You do not know if anyone in the DMIT organization has watched this movie, right?
To my knowledge, no.
All right, now Detective Bramberg, let's move on. When Wesley Everett was in holding, awaiting transport to the Pine County Jail, you attempted to speak with him.
Can you repeat that, please?
When Wesley Everett was in holding, awaiting transport to the Pine County Jail, you attempted to speak with him, right?
Yeah, I tried to, but at that point, I didn't know that they were giving me solid information.
Yeah, he would only babble nonsense, right?
At that point, I thought so.
You didn't even take notes during that conversation, correct?
Like I answered, I thought at that point, they weren't giving me any information to further my investigation until I spoke to him a second time.
The next day, after reviewing statements gathered from witnesses, you turned on the local television station, right?
Yes, that's when I saw the press conference.
Mm-hmm. And Britt Smithson was answering questions from the media, right?
Correct.
And from the gist of Smithson's presentation was that the group was not associated with Wesley Everett in any way, right?
Correct.
And that they disapproved of Everett's actions on September 16th.
Well, after they did that, that's when Everett came to me to speak about what really happened.
And Smithson said that they're only interested in achieving the result through legal means and peaceful direct action.
Britt Smithson said that, but based on my investigation and findings, it was the opposite.
But that is a yes, right?
Yes.
Okay, now let's move on. You gathered evidence to prove Tracy Whitney's involvement, right?
Correct.
And by doing this, you mobilized the team, right?
Can you repeat that, please?
And by doing this, you mobilized the team?
Yes, I did.
And you assigned them to follow up with various possible witnesses?
Yes.
And you previously stated that you couldn't find any members of the inner circle Everett described who would admit to knowing anything about Wesley Everett's actions, right?
Unfortunately, I could not find any of the inner circle.
And the members who attended DMIT meetings, none of them ever heard of any discussion of violent behavior, right?
Those who attended the public meetings did not.
Yes. And also, none of the members who attended DMIT meetings heard any talk of damaging property either, right?
Not to that extent, no.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Detective Bramberg, what were the coded languages being used today?
Energetic Tango and Baby House of Blocks.
And what were the true meaning behind those words?
Energetic Tango was a signal to the group to show that their next steps were going to be violent and near. Baby House of Blocks was invaded and destroyed.
And did you need to know if anyone watched Electric Boogaloo or even take notes to come up with your conclusion?
No, my conclusions were based on the phrases on the website.
And last question. Based on your findings, what conclusion did you come up with?
Tracy Whitney attempted to communicate the need for direct and violent action through coded language.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thanks. Do you have any recross?
No recross, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Does the prosecution have any further witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Your Honor, the prosecution now calls Wesley Everett to the stand. Good evening. Please introduce yourself to the court.
Hello, my name is Wesley Everett, and I am a game designer from Alki City.
Can you tell us how you're related to today's case?
Well, I was present at the September 16th protest, and I was actually tricked by DEMA into breaking the statue for them.
We will get into the details of your relationship to DEMA in a moment, but for now, can you explain how you ended up in Barryton?
Well, my job lets me work wherever I want, so I decided to move to Barryton because it's cheaper than most other places in Washington.
And how did you enter DEMIT?
Well, when I first moved here, I didn't know anyone, so I got an app called Meet Me. That's where I discovered DMIT.
And how did the members of DEMIT treat you?
Well, generally, they were pretty nice, especially Britt Smithson. They always seemed to be on my side during the argument.
And how did your relationship with Britt Smithson progress?
Well, after I started attending the DMIT sessions regularly, me and Britt Smithson actually got pretty close. That was around the time that they invited me to the inner circle and gave me Tracy Whitney's contact info. At the time, I was happy to be making new friends, but I shouldn't have been so naive.
What was naive?
Well, there were a lot of red flags when I first contacted Whitney. I mean, they made us talk on encrypted message channels, but I was just happy to be meeting new people.
Now, Mr. Everett, speaking of these red flags, I would like to direct your attention to Exhibit 4. Your Honor, permission for my co-counsel to display previously admitted Exhibit 4.
Granted.
Mr. Everett, do you recognize the contents of this exhibit?
Yes, the emails exchanged between me and Tracy Whitney.
And would you mind reading the email Tracy Whitney sent to you on March 8th, 2019?
Of course. Britt Smithson mentioned you would contact me and introduce yourself. Heard good things about your commitment to the cause. Follow Smithson lead. I instruct only 1 or 2 in each chapter, so no mixed signals. Use encrypted channel for tactic talk. Retention in head when possible. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Everett, how did you interpret these emails?
Well, when Tracy Whitney said that they only instruct 1 or 2 people in each chapter, I assumed that was me and Britt Smithson. I mean, they said no mixed signals after all, so why would they bother contacting me if I wasn't one of the people?
I would now like to bring your attention to Exhibit 6. Your Honor, permission for my co-counsel to display what has been previously admitted as Exhibit 6.
Granted.
Mr. Everett, do you recognize this?
Yes, it's the letter that a couple local DMIT members presented to City Council in regards to taking down the Alton Berry statue.
And what was your involvement in presenting this letter?
Well, funny enough, I actually wanted to come to present it to City Council, but Britt Smithson told me explicitly that I shouldn't come and that my direct involvement would be more in the civic involvement phase.
Were there any other times you were in communication with Tracy Whitney?
Yes, actually. I was on a video call with them on August 22nd.
And what was the subject matter of that video conference?
Well, it was really, we were talking about future demonstrations in Barryton, and also Britt Smithson was going over what happened on the Jim Cook protests in Australia. They described how the DMIT members pummeled one of the security guards and said that that's what we need here. And they said that we needed that energy there. I heard it actually got pretty violent.
And how did Tracy Whitney respond when they mentioned the violence at the Australia protest?
Well, I remember after Britt Smithson went into pretty explicit detail of what happened, Tracy Whitney thanked him after.
Now, Mr. Everett, on the topic of demonstrations, did you attend any?
Yes, I was present at the final protest on September 16th.
And can you describe your role at the beginning of the September 16th protest?
Well, I was instructed by Britt Smithson into live streaming the event for other DMIT members to watch who couldn't have shown up, and for Tracy Whitney to watch and get feedback.
Did anything significant happen while you were live streaming?
Yes, actually. I remember Miss Smithson was in the middle of a speech when Tracy Whitney yelled through the tablet, "Energetic Tango."
Mr. Everett, can you tell us what energetic tango means?
Well, it was my understanding as a member of the Inner Circle of Demon that when we heard Energetic Tango, it meant the time for direct action against a statue.
And what did you proceed to do when you heard Tracy Whitney say energetic tango?
Well, after that, Britt Smithson said, "Go, go," and handed me a sledgehammer. So I jumped on the base of the statue and I whacked it a couple times.
Is an objection, council basis?
Hearsay.
Response?
Your Honor, Britt Smithson's statements are non-hearsay under Evidence Rule 801D2E as Britt Smithson is a co-conspirator.
I'll overrule the objection.
Now, Mr. Everett, what happened after that?
Well, after I hit the statue, the arm fell off. But that's the first time I saw Del Hubbard. The arm hit them in the head, and after I turned around to get them help, but everyone had already disappeared, and I was handcuffed before I knew it. Police threw me on the ground, and that's what happened.
And how did this event affect DMIT?
Well, the next thing I know, Britt Smithson and Tracy Whitney completely turn on me. They just throw me to the side like a pawn and act like they never knew me or had no involvement just to save their own necks.
Thank you. No further questions.
Ross?
Yes, Your Honor. Let's first talk about your DMIT chapter. When you first came to Barryton, you're isolated.
Well,
Objection, relevance.
This is laying background foundation to following questions.
It was also elicited during direct examination. I'll allow it. You may answer the question.
Well, when I first moved here, I'd never lived here, so I didn't know anyone. So, of course, I was isolated.
And you're desperate to find others to connect with?
I mean, I wasn't desperate, but I didn't know anyone in the town, so of course I wanted to meet new people.
And so you joined book clubs, right?
I mean, yeah, that's the best way I knew of finding people.
But you found them boring?
I found most of them boring. I felt like none of them were really stimulating.
Mm-hmm. And so in late 2018, you joined DMIT, right?
After finding DMIT on Meet Me and attending a couple of the meetings, I decided that I actually really enjoyed it.
Yes, and you had always longed to be part of something big, right?
Well, after getting my minor in history, I always loved the past social events of history, and I always thought it would be very interesting to be a part of one myself.
Yes, you're immediately hooked, right?
I mean, prior to joining DMIT, I had not been intellectually stimulated anywhere else in my life, so I did find it really, really intriguing.
And leaving the group would have left you isolated again, right?
I mean, at the time it would have left me isolated, but I could have just found more people and more friends.
All right, now let's move on to September 16th, the final day of the demonstration. On the day of the demonstration, you held the tablet to live stream when you weren't speaking, right?
Britt Smithson did instruct me to live stream the entire event that day.
And during the demonstration, you gave a couple of speeches, right?
Yeah, I did actually give a couple of speeches.
You let your anger and frustration out?
Well, at the time, it felt like our local city council wasn't even listening to us. So I did let some of my frustration boil to the surface.
Mm-hmm. And towards the end of the rally, Tracy Whitney's face filled the tablet screen, correct?
Yeah, actually, I remember Tracy Whitney coming on the tablet screen and yelling "Energetic Tango."
Mm-hmm. And according to you, everyone involved in the inner circle knew what those words meant, right?
Yes, we all understood perfectly what it meant.
And the people at that rally, they were worked up, right?
I mean, I would say most people were worked up, especially the DMIT members, but some people were just citizens who had no idea what was going on.
Exactly, the DMIT members were worked up. Yet you were the only one who jumped on the statue, isn't that right?
Well, I was the only one directed by Smithson to jump on the statue.
So that's a yes?
Yes.
And you were also the only person to hurt Del Hubbard?
Well, I was the only person that hurt Del Hubbard, but I didn't mean it intentionally.
But according to you, Tracy Whitney screamed energetic tango, correct?
Yeah, I heard Tracy Whitney yell energetic tango through the live stream broadcast.
And normally if someone were to scream, people would hear it, right?
I mean, I'm sure a bunch of other people at the protest heard Tracy Whitney say the same thing.
Okay, now let's move on. You have pled guilty to 1 count of malicious mischief in the first degree, right?
Well, I mean, after I heard Del Hubbard, I really do feel guilty for what happened.
So that's a yes?
Yes.
And 1 count of reckless endangerment of Del Hubbard?
Objection, relevance.
Counsel, what's the relevance?
This has to do with the plea deal and how his testimony affects the outcome of what happens in the case.
I'll allow it.
And 1 count of reckless endangerment of Del Hubbard?
Well, I mean, I pled guilty because I really think that what DMIT and Tracy Whitney have been doing is really despicable, and I want the truth to be present for everyone to see.
And lastly, also 1 count of telephone harassment of Mayor Grimm?
Yeah, I did plead guilty to that.
Okay. Your sentencing hearing has been postponed until after this trial, isn't that so?
I believe it has, yes.
And you have not been sentenced?
Not currently, no.
And your sentencing is based on your testimony today, isn't that right?
I mean, it is, but I'm not speaking here just to get a lighter sentence. What Britt Smithson and Tracy Whitney were doing is really despicable.
All right, thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Okay. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Mr. Everett, during your emails with the defendant, could you describe, if any, instructions you were given by them?
Yes. Tracy Whitney told me explicitly to follow Britt Smithson's lead.
And before you jumped onto the statue, what did Britt Smithson tell you to do?
Well, Britt Smithson tapped me on the shoulder and then told me to go, 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 and handed me the sledgehammer.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Okay. Any further cross-examination?
No recross, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, thank you. Does the prosecution have any additional witnesses?
No, Your Honor. At this time, the prosecution rests.
Okay. And is this the time that the parties wish to break or a little bit later?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, then pursuant to my previous ruling, we will take a 10-minute recess. It is now 6:27 p.m.
Your Honor, the prosecution is ready to proceed.
All right, defense back.
We're ready to proceed as well, Your Honor.
Okay, just want to make sure the Raiders are back to. Okay, I see 1, 2, 4. There you go. All right, defense, you may call your first witness.
The defense calls Professor Hess to the stand. Good afternoon, and can you please introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Robin Hess.
Mr. Hess, what do you do for a living?
I'm a professor of social and legal studies at Fair Harbor College. I've been teaching for about 20 years now.
And what's your expertise in that field?
I have a bachelor's degree in sociology, but more importantly for today's case, I have a Juris Doctorate from the University of Puget Sound Law School.
How are you involved in today's case?
I've been asked to provide my opinions on the factors that jurors should consider when deciding whether the communications between Tracy Whitney and the DMI movement are protected by the First Amendment.
Let's talk about the First Amendment a bit more. Are you familiar with the Brandenburg versus Ohio case?
Yes, I am.
Can you explain to me some of the changes that happened because of this Brandenburg versus Ohio case?
From that case, the Brandenburg test was created.
Could you tell me what this Brandenburg test is used for?
This test is used to determine whether oral or written expressions violate the First Amendment.
What goes into that decision?
In order for someone to be punished for inflammatory speech, there must be an intent to cause all this action. That action must be imminent, and there must be a likelihood that action will occur.
Let's apply that test to some exhibits. Would you recognize the letter between Whitney and Mayor Grimm?
Yes, I would.
May my co-counsel please display the previously admitted exhibit number 6. Professor Hess, is this letter protected speech?
Yes, I would say it is.
Could you explain why?
As you can see, Tracy says in the letter, immediate compliance will avoid any unpleasant consequences. To be classified as an imminent action, there must be a date or time, which this statement lacks.
Thank you. May my co-counsel please switch to the previously admitted exhibit or exhibit number 5. I'll have you look at the text, bring the hammer down tomorrow. Professor Hess, would you say that this text is protected speech?
Yes, again, I would say it is.
Could you please explain why again?
In my experience, words should be interpreted according to their common meaning because in most cases, that is how the audience will process them. The text states, ready to bring the hammer down tomorrow, which is a common idiom. Like I said, the audience will process this statement by acting on the common meaning, which is not to literally hit something with a hammer.
And my co-counsel, please display exhibit number 2, page 56. Professor Hess, can you tell me what this is?
This is the website of the DMI. Yeah, the DMI website.
Is this a fair and accurate representation of the DMI website?
Yes, I would say so.
Your Honor, the defense offers up exhibit number 2 into evidence.
Any objections?
No objections, Your Honor.
Will be admitted.
Professor Hess, in your expert opinion, are these modified Thoreau quotes protected speech?
Yes, I would say they are.
Why?
In order to be protected speech, the statement would have to lack intent, likelihood, or imminence. It's my expert opinion that in this case, the statement is lacking imminence.
Thank you. No further questions.
Ross?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Hess, the line between free expression and speech that encourages others to act illegally is, as you say, not always easy to discern.
Yes, of course.
And now, you didn't see all of DMIT's encrypted communications.
Yes, only the stuff in evidence.
But the messages you did see increased in urgency leading up to the protest.
It seemed that way, yes.
And Mr. Hess, you rely on State v. Fulmer for your opinion.
Yes.
State v. Fulmer holds that words may not be protected the more they focus on a particular target and act.
That is correct.
And you are aware that the specific target of DMIT is the Alton Berry statue.
Yes, I'm aware.
You're also aware that the specific act is the immediate removal of the statue?
Yes, I am.
Your Honor, permission for my co-counsel to display Exhibit 3.
Granted.
Mr. Hess, Exhibit 3 is the poster created by the DMIT organization.
That is correct.
This wanted poster in Exhibit 3 is troubling to your opinion because you find it similar to ones from other organizations which were true threats.
That is correct, but in the end, I've decided that yes, it is protected by the First Amendment.
You tried to reconcile this with your opinion by saying the poster doesn't specify a location nor an action.
Yeah, no, it lacks in location and action. It lacks any kind of timeline.
But the poster clearly specifies a target location, the Berry statue.
It does.
And not only does it specify a location, but a specific action as well. As the poster says, Berry statue taken down by any means necessary.
It says that, yes.
Now, Professor Hess, State v. Fulmer also holds that words are not protected if they instill fear in future targets.
That is correct.
Your Honor, permission for my co-counsel to display Exhibit 6.
Granted.
This is Tracy Whitney's letter to the mayor, correct?
That is correct, yes.
And it demands immediate removal and destruction of the statue.
That is correct.
Now, tell me if I'm misspeaking here, but the last line reads, immediate compliance will avoid any unpleasant consequences for Barryton, its facilities, and its employees. This statement instills fear as to future targets under Fulmer.
Like I previously said, this is protected by the First Amendment because, in my opinion, it's lacking imminence.
Your Honor, permission for my co-counsel to display Exhibit 2.
Granted.
Now, you studied the language on the DMIT website.
I did.
And the last line of the omission reads, anyone defending the blockhouses when they are invaded and destroyed will be swept aside as well, right?
It does say that, yes.
And this refers to people being swept aside.
Yes, it does.
Now, the event section for July 18 reads, Hartford, Connecticut, tear the blockhouses down, does it not?
It does say that, yes.
And below that for September 16th for Barryton reads, monuments fall, correct?
It says that, yes.
Your Honor, permission for co-counsel to display Exhibit 4.
Right.
Professor Hess, you saw these emails from defendant to member.
I do not believe Exhibit 4 has been entered into evidence yet.
Counsel?
Permission to respond, Your Honor?
Yes, go ahead.
Your Honor, we are under the impression that all 6 exhibits have been previously admitted, and therefore all evidence included in the exhibits are admissible, and this witness can testify to them.
I believe they're to be deemed authenticated, but until they've been admitted by the court, unless I'm mistaken, they have not been admitted yet. But they've been this exhibit has been previously testified to by, I believe, a prosecution witness, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
So I will allow it, even though you had not moved to admit it at the time that the witness was testifying to it about it. I believe the appropriate foundation was established during that testimony. So I will allow its admission based on the previous testimony.
Now, Professor Hess, you saw these emails from defendant to member Wesley Everett.
I did, yes.
And am I misreading the email from August 20th, where the defendant tells Mr. Everett, time for talk is almost over, and once time for action begins, you will be in the forefront?
You're not misreading that, no.
And am I also misreading the September 14th email sent 2 days before the incident, where the defendant tells Wesley Everett, be willing to sacrifice yourself and others if necessary?
You're reading that correctly, yes.
Thank you. No further questions.
Okay. Redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. Professor Hess, there are 3 parts to the Brandenburg test, correct?
There are
What are those 3 parts?
intent, eminence, and likelihood.
Does exhibit number 3 pass the Brandenburg test?
It is the
Objection, Your
exhibits are
Honor.
predictive. No.
What's the basis?
Beyond the scope of cross?
No, I don't believe it is, since you did inquire of him quite extensively about his expertise and his interpretation of what is protected and not protected speech. I will allow him to respond.
I'll rephrase the question though. Professor Hess, is exhibit number 3 protected speech?
I would say that it is lacking eminence because of a lack of a definite timeline or day of an action to occur.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Do you have any recross?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Thank you. Defense, you may call your next witness.
The defense now calls Britt Smithson. Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
Hi, I'm Britt Smithson, owner of Smithson Construction.
Why are you here today?
I'm here because I'm a chapter leader of the DMITE organization.
Okay, let's first talk about your study group. First, do you know who Alton Berry is?
Yes, as the founder of Barryton, people acted as if he's Lewis and Clark or something. But what they don't know is how awful and inhumane he really was. He only acted to promote himself.
And after learning about this, what did you do?
I created the Pine County Alt Historical Society Study Group
And when did you create this group?
many months before I'd ever heard of the DMIT movement, probably late 2017.
And what did this group focus on?
We focused on many issues related solely to our area, not just the removal of the Alton Berry statue.
And how were group discussions?
Well, they were kind of like our numbers, small and little more than that. We rehashed the same things, sort of like an echo chamber. Admittedly, I was thinking about abandoning the group.
So what did you do next?
That's when I found out about DMITE, with the director being Tracy Whitney. I believed his ideas on organization and plans were what we needed to grow and attract new people.
And did you agree with all the philosophy that Tracy Whitney put forth on the website?
No, why just because some historical leaders were bad should we take down all statues?
And after the merge, how did your local chapter act?
Our local chapter still acted independently, where I would make the decisions about planning and stuff like that and keep Tracy informed.
And did this merge attract new people?
Yes, although admittedly some were more desirable than others. I knew Wesley Everett could be trouble.
All right, now let's talk about Wesley Everett. Was Wesley Everett at many of the DMIT meetings?
Yes.
And how did Wesley Everett act during those meetings?
Well, he was very intense. He ingratiated himself to everyone and was honestly quite annoying. We often had to intervene to bring the conversation back on topic.
And when Wesley Everett testified, he said there was an inner circle. Did your chapter have an inner circle?
Inner circle, no. A group of us who met after our DMIT meetings for drinks and to talk about history, so maybe he thought that was the inner circle?
And was Wesley Everett part of that after meeting?
No. Even if we did have an inner circle, I can confidently say Wesley Everett would not have been part of it.
And was Wesley Everett invited to the meeting with Merrill Grimm?
No, I wanted a normal negotiation of the removal of the Berry statue through, might I add, the lawful process.
Now that leads into our next section, Ms. Smithson, September 16th. Ms. Smithson, before the events of the demonstration, what were you doing that day?
Well, as a committed owner of a very prominent construction company in our area, I was at a site with my company's architect and engineer discussing how we would lay the building foundation considering the rebar was misconfigured.
And where did you go from that construction site?
From there, I took my F-350 to the demonstration.
Did you have anything in your truck?
I had some miscellaneous tools, including a sledgehammer, because, construction workers use those quite often.
And was Wesley Everett at the demonstration?
Yes, he was present.
And what was his role in the protest?
Everett honestly had a minor role. He was to hold the tablet and live stream the proceedings while I was speaking.
How did the protest start out?
I first spoke, and then Everett jumped up to address the crowd. I wasn't really expecting that, but hey, free speech and all. Later, I went up to make a couple of announcements about our next study meeting.
And when you're speaking for the second time, what did you hear?
I thought I heard Tracy's voice, though it was unintelligible, so I didn't really hear what was said.
And was Wesley Everett holding the tablet at that point?
Yes, he was.
And after Tracy supposedly spoke into the tablet, what did Everett do?
His expression became indignant, and then he shoved the tablet at me and jumped up onto the statue's base with my sledgehammer.
And do you know how the sledgehammer got into Everett's hands?
No.
And were DMIT supporters at the September 16th protest?
Yes, that seemed to be the general consensus.
And was Wesley Everett the only person to deface the Alton-Berry statue?
Yes.
And lastly, do you know what the phrase energetic tango means?
It was a joke nickname we gave to Whitney after a video of him surfaced doing a horrendous victory dance after a DMIT event in New Mexico. He doesn't like it, but really it was just a meaningless joke.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
All right, thank you. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Ms. Smithson. You are a part of debunking Ms. Story, isn't that correct?
Yes.
You worked with Tracy Whitney?
Yes, I did.
Now, you didn't always agree with Tracy Whitney's philosophy.
No.
This philosophy being to destroy all statues?
No, as I said before, why take down all statues when not all historical figures were bad?
Yes, and you also believe that some of Tracy Whitney's protest techniques could only lead to violence.
Yes.
You and Tracy Whitney exchanged messages frequently.
Yes, I kept him informed and he gave encouragement.
You would also ask Tracy Whitney for words of encouragement.
Yes, that's what I said.
But all of these messages were through encrypted programs, correct?
Yes.
Now those messages. Thank you. Now those messages were on your laptop.
Yes, my old laptop. It unfortunately fell into the river and sank to the bottom, so yeah.
Yes, unfortunately. You will live stream your protests and demonstrations, correct?
We do. Tracy can't be everywhere at once, so he likes to see them over the live stream.
Tracy Whitney would watch his live streams?
Yes.
And they would comment on your protest, correct?
He did provide some encouragement.
And also words of inspiration?
Yes.
You knew Wesley Everett was potential trouble, correct?
Yes.
You suspected Wesley Everett to be a loose cannon?
That is correct.
In spite all
Objection, lack of personal knowledge.
You re-ask,
Your Honor,
counsel, re-ask the question, please. Sorry.
yes. You suspected Wesley Everett to be a loose cannon?
I did suspect that, yes.
Still objection, lack of personal knowledge.
Your Honor, this...
Counsel, why don't you ask the basis of her knowing that?
Yes, Your Honor. I have a question, Your Honor.
Yes.
You would like for me to reform that question?
Why don't you rephrase that question? Well, establish how she would know that someone is a loose cannon.
Got it.
In other words, the
You-
foundation.
Okay. You knew Wesley Everett was potential trouble and intense kind,
Yes, I did. He was very intense.
and that sometimes Wesley Everett can go rogue on his own accord.
Yes, we often had to intervene to bring it back.
So you could say Wesley Everett is a loose cannon.
You could.
Still objection, lack of personal knowledge.
Overruled. I believe she has established that she knows the individual and his behavior.
In spite of all of that, you still gave Wesley Everett Tracy Whitney's encrypted contact,
Yes, I did give him Tracy Whitney's contact.
which Wesley Everett then told you he had in-depth conversations with Tracy Whitney.
He did tell me that, but I wasn't a part of them, so I can't be sure what was said in the email.
But Wesley Everett mentioned to you about the need that Tracy Whitney said that for the need of direct action against the statue, correct?
Yes,
And he told you this occasionally.
that is correct.
So more than once.
I believe so.
Now, defendant Tracy Whitney called for you to be on a meeting on August 22nd.
Yes,
At this meeting, you can clearly recall the defendant saying, physical effort must have a purpose and achieve a goal, correct?
I believe he did say that.
At the August 22nd meeting, you discussed what you call the success of the Australian statue being torn down.
Yes, the rally was seen as a success.
Where they tore down a statue and injured the groundskeeper until he got out the way, correct?
Yes,
You knew Tracy Whitney was watching closely.
I did know that he watches some live streams.
But is that a yes or no?
A yes.
Thank you. And Tracy Whitney didn't bother to correct you or interrupt you, correct?
No, he did not correct or interrupt me.
They didn't need to because it was consistent with DMIT's philosophy.
Yes, it was consistent.
Now, on August 16, you went to the protest from a nearby construction site, correct?
Yes, it was my construction site.
During the protest, you asked Wesley Everett to hold the tablet.
That was his role.
And you knew Tracy Whitney was watching, correct?
That was my understanding.
While you were speaking, you heard Tracy Whitney say something.
I thought it was Tracy's voice, but I can't be sure what was said.
But you could tell that Tracy Whitney sounded excited, correct?
Again, I can't be sure. It was very unintelligible.
What's the basis of your objection?
Speculation.
Overruled.
I'll re-ask. But you could tell Tracy Whitney sounded excited, correct?
As I said, it was unintelligible, so all I heard was his voice.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. And that's when Wesley Everett jumped onto the statue's base, correct?
Yes,
You noticed the sledgehammer in Wesley Everett's hand
I did.
from your toolbox?
It was mine.
Thank you, Honor. No further questions.
Redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. Do you know how Wesley Everett received the sledgehammer?
No, after I'd taken my truck from the site, I had my tools in it, but I didn't take it out. I left it in the bed of my truck.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Okay. Do you have any limited recross based on that one question?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Defense, you may call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Aylin Strong to the stand. Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
Hello, ma'am. My name is Aylin Strong.
And what is your profession, Ms. Strong?
I am a reporter for the Barrington Standard.
And how long have you been working for the Barrington Standard?
Since I got out of college, a while before that, I'd been wanting to be one, so it was the obvious choice.
And what is your experience concerning the Alton Berry statue?
Well, for the Barrington Standard, I cover the government beat, and it's usually boring land appeals and uncontroversial votes, very boring stuff. So this is one of the most interesting things that has popped up. And so when it came across me, I decided to take it up, and I've been covering it from start to finish.
And when was the first time you heard about this case?
The first time I heard about this case was in the fall of 2018, when Britt Smithson stormed into City Hall and accused Merrill Graham of fancying up one of his dead relatives' statues.
And did you ever attend the DMIT protests?
Yes, in order to write good and lengthy articles about the protests, I had to attend them, so I attended all of them.
Were the protests ever violent before the September 16th one?
They never were, no.
You are familiar with all the speakers and main members present at each protest?
Yes, I am, in order to write articles that are about each speaker. I have to know the speaker's name.
And you had never heard of Mr. and Mrs. You had never heard of Wesley Everett before that day?
No, I had not.
Did you ever see Wesley Everett at the rallies before September 16th?
In person, no.
And was violence or destruction brought up during the September 16th protest?
No. Not that I know of, no.
And can you describe what happened after you thought the protest ended?
Well, quite a few things happened at once. First, an image of Whitney flashed over the live stream I had on my iPad to take photos a couple of times.
And in this image you speak of, did Whitney seem like he was present or like he was recording them live as the protest was happening?
No, they looked computer generated, sort of like a bot. I've encountered these before on the DMIT website in the past.
What happened next?
Well, then Wesley Everett handed something to Britt Smithson. Britt looked taken aback or surprised, and then Wesley Everett hopped up onto the statue.
And did anyone else jump up after Everett?
No, nobody did.
What happened next?
Then Dale Hubbard went up to stop Wesley Everett as he had started breaking down the statue with this sledgehammer. And then Wesley Everett dropped the sledgehammer onto Dale Hubbard's head.
How did Everett acquire this sledgehammer?
I don't know. It may have been handed to him, or he may have just had it on him. What I do know is he had it on him when he was on the statue already.
Finally, did you see Tracy Whitney present at this protest?
No.
Did you see Whitney at any previous protests?
In person, no.
To be clear, you've never seen or heard Tracy Whitney present at the September 16th protest, or any other protest for that matter?
No, I have not, no.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Ross?
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Ms. Strong. Now, I'd like to start by talking a bit about your career. Starting in the fall of 2018, you began reporting on the controversy of the Alton Berry statue. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Now, when you first started reporting, you worked with Britt Smithson to gather quotes and information regarding the statue renovation. Is that right?
That is correct. He was quite a good source.
But when you told Smithson that you planned to do a series on debunking mystery and interview Tracy Whitney, things changed, didn't they?
Yes, he got quite more reserved.
Britt Smithson was not authorized to give out contact information, was she?
No, she was not.
Smithson even stopped talking to you and providing information to you.
She still talked to me, just not as open as before.
Is it your testimony today that Smithson continued to talk to you?
Well, not as.
It's a yes or no question.
Yes, it was. She did.
Smithson continued to talk to you?
Yes, she did.
Your Honor, I ask that time be stopped for the impeachment process.
Granted.
Permission for my co-counsel to display the PDF of this witness's testimony, written testimony. Now, I will be referring to page 49, lines 30 through 31. Is this your witness statement, Ms. Strong?
Yes, it is.
My co-counsel, I will be referring to page 49, lines 30 through 31. Co-counsel? Page 49, lines 30 through 31. If you're having trouble finding, will you unmute and say something?
Could you refer to the quote that you're referring to?
On page 49, lines 30 through 31, it says that Smithson stopped talking to Lindstrom. You need to scroll up on the screen. Permission for opposing counsel or the bailiff to display this exhibit. It seems that we're having some technical difficulties.
Yeah, if we can overcome the technical difficulties that way.
I could do it, Your Honor, if no one else is available.
Thank you.
Give me a sec. Is it okay if the exhibit is displayed on a different app, OneNote? Is that fine with you, Your Honor?
Fine with me, so long as it doesn't cause any technical difficulties.
It's the testimony of A. Lindstrom.
Page 49, right?
Yeah, correct.
Is that
lines 30 through 31?
Are they not displaying?
They're displaying.
Pardon, I think it's having issues again.
All right, well, let's do this in the interest of time. Does the witness have that statement in front of her?
I do not.
You do not, okay.
Your Honor, permission to speak?
Yes.
I have a paper copy. Am I allowed to display that on my screen?
Why don't you go ahead and do that?
Okay, Your Honor. And co-counsel, you said page 49?
Page 49, lines 30 through 31.
Okay. this isn't, is it blurred? Oh, this is,
It's also extremely small, so unfortunately, I don't think that's going to work either.
I'll take a picture of this and I'll display it. How about that?
All right.
Okay.
Your Honor, I could display it on my screen if I found it and I'm not having any technical
All right.
difficulties.
Thank you for that.
It's these lines, correct?
Yes, it looks like that's, yes, line 30.
Correct me if I read along and correct me if I misspeak. Then Britt stopped talking to me or providing any information other than the scripted stuff used at meetings and protests. Did I misspeak?
Your Honor, I said in my testimony that other than scripted stuff. So he did continue to talk to me. It was just, he didn't need to talk as freely.
I'll rephrase the question. Smith even stopped talking to you and providing information to you regarding Tracy Whitney's strategy removal. Is that correct?
That is correct.
When you asked for more access, thank you, opposing counsel, you can stop screen sharing. When you asked for more access, Smithson told you that she had her marching orders. Is that right?
That is correct.
Now, you interpret this to be Tracy Whitney giving instructions to Smithson?
I did, yes.
And these marching orders were to limit access to information about debunking mystery and Tracy Whitney's statue removal strategy. Is that right?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
And these marching orders that you interpreted were to limit access to information about debunking mystery and Tracy Whitney's statue removal strategy. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you, Ms. Strong. Now, you covered the 5th protest on September 16th, 2019. Is that right?
I did. I covered all the protests.
You had obtained the invite code to the broadcast from Smithson, so you were able to watch the broadcast of this event. Is that right?
Yes.
And you were also present at the protest in person. Is that right?
I was, yes.
Now, the program that Debunking Mystery used to broadcast had a blocking device, didn't it?
It did. I could not record it.
Right. This blocking device meant that you were not able to record the broadcast. But while you were watching the broadcast, you saw Tracy Whitney appear on the screen a few times. Is that right?
Yes, I did.
You said that each time the image of Whitney appeared to be talking.
Yes.
30 seconds before Wesley jumped onto the statue, Tracy Whitney appeared on the screen again.
That is correct.
Whitney shouted something on the screen.
He did.
After Everett attacked the statue and injured Dell Hubbard, you attempted to get a comment from Smithson. Is that correct?
Yes, I wanted to see what his thoughts were.
But Smithson was nowhere to be found.
No, he wasn't. Yes, he was gone.
And even the next day, Smithson refused to answer questions at the press conference. Is that right?
That is true.
So you received no comments or answers to questions from Demon after the attack on the statue. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Okay, any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Defense, please call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Tracy Whitney to the stand. May I begin?
Yes.
Good evening. Please introduce yourself to the court.
Good afternoon. My name is Tracy Whitney.
And what do you do for a living, Mr. Whitney?
Well, I used to be a part-time history professor, but that was a drag, and now I work full-time on my website debunking the story.
Could you tell us more about Debunking Mystery?
Well, yeah, it's a place where I post my own articles.
And what is the purpose of debunking mystery?
Well, we specialize on taking down statues because they're a reminder of oppression.
Could you explain how?
Well, yes, the statues are depicting people who weren't necessarily good people. So I would like to start over with the blank slate and get rid of the reminders for the groups of people who were oppressed by them.
How far did this get?
Well, since I expanded its digital footprint in my spare time when I was teaching history in college, people reached out to me and asked to create groups using my materials, which are now called chapters. There's over 100 affiliates all over the world.
In Barryton's chapter, who was a local leader?
That was Britt Smithson. All chapter leaders have to pay a startup fee, and she organized everything that happens within Barryton.
How do you communicate with all these staff workers?
My staff workers communicate through email, and frequently asked questions are answered by a screening algorithm that's answered by a bot. And for important people like chapter presidents, we use encrypted messaging.
Why do you use encrypted messaging?
Well, my work is very controversial, even when I was teaching at higher levels of academics. And so I pay for my privacy and for the safety of the chapter leaders. The government's always watching you somehow, and unfortunately, this time of age, you get attacked for your beliefs.
Now, moving on to the day of the incident, where were you on September 16th?
I was doing some paperwork in my home in the Midwest, and then I checked in on a protest that was going on in Georgia.
So you were never in Pine County?
No, not until this trial right now.
Did you watch the demonstration in Barryton?
Yes, I did. I watched it because Britt Smithson already set up the video conference and everything.
Did you say anything while watching?
If I did, they were probably small and important things like good job or just small encouragement.
Do you recall saying anything along the lines of energetic tango?
No, it's still a nickname for me, honestly. It's something my friends do when I personally think that my dancing is pretty good, but apparently they don't think so.
Were you expecting Wesley Everett's outburst?
No, he wasn't really the type to, well, he never really spoke at meetings and he never was mentioned, so I didn't think he was the type to do that.
After Everett's outburst, how did you react?
It was very shocking because I had to contact Britt Smithson afterwards to find out what had happened. I'm very sorry that Del Hubbard was injured.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Okay, Ross?
Yes, Your Honor. Good evening, Mr. Whitney. Now, you founded the Debunking Mystery Society, also known as DMIT, is that correct?
Yes, it's my pride and joy.
You spent a lot of time building DMIT's digital footprint and social media presence, is that right?
Yes, it's much better than teaching history.
When you originally founded DMIT, you had multiple teaching jobs, is that correct?
Yes, I taught part-time 2 classes.
Right, and eventually you were able to quit your other jobs and run DMIT as a full-time job, is that right?
Yes, I get ad revenue from it. I'm really glad that I quit teaching for this.
And you won't specify how much you earn?
No, I won't.
So let's talk about what's involved with running DMIT. Inquiries about DMIT are screened using an algorithm that identifies certain frequently seen words or phrases, is that right?
Yes, frequently asked questions are answered by that bot.
So any repeated inquiries would be sent an automatic message or video response.
Yes.
And this message or video was pre-written or pre-recorded by you yourself, is that right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Whitney. Now, important members of DMIT were able to communicate with you through encrypted back channels, is that right?
Yes, for our privacy and safety.
And you use these encrypted back channels to communicate with Britt Smithson and others who were in the Barryton chapter of Debunking Mystery in the summer and fall of 2019.
Yes, I'm sure I definitely communicated with them through that way.
This is when their activities were moving to the action stage, is that right?
Yeah.
But computers used for these encrypted back channels are no longer available?
Yeah, we upgraded our technology.
Now, you said that your encrypted service might have some record of these messages. Is that correct?
Yes, it might, but I don't want anyone going into my private stuff. I pay for it for a reason.
Right, so you won't allow anyone to check these messages, will you?
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, after the 4th protest in Barryton, you attended a video conference with members of the Barryton affiliate. Is that right?
Yes, I did.
The Australia rallies were brought up at this video conference?
Yes, I think Britt Smithson used them as a way of encouragement.
And the Australia rallies were referred to as a success. Is that correct?
Yes, we managed to take down the Cook statue.
Now, Mr. Whitney, you were in communication with Wesley Everett prior to September 16th, 2019, were you not?
I don't really recall, but it must have been according to the text messages, which I should only have access to.
Your Honor, permission for my co-counsel to display the PDF of Exhibit 4.
Granted.
My co-counsel will now display what has previously been marked as Exhibit 4. What are these, Mr. Whitney?
These are emails supposedly sent from my account.
And these email exchanges are between your account and the email account belonging to Wesley Everett?
Yes, but I don't recall writing these emails. A staff member could have written them.
Mr. Whitney, I am now going to read aloud the email sent from your account to the account belonging to Wesley Everett on September 14th, 2019 at 2:32 p.m. The last thing you want to do now is lose heart. Who cares what Grimm and the mayor city council lackeys think? We weren't counting on them to do the right thing. Quite the opposite. Now we have the justification for action, and we need in the eyes of your town. Have patience to win and be willing to sacrifice yourself and others if necessary. Just be ready for anything on Monday. Keep your eyes, ears open. The crowd will be with us and time may be right. If we press our advantage aggressively, things may come down the result we desire. Good luck. Did I misspeak?
No, you didn't.
Thank you. Co-counsel, you can stop sharing this exhibit. Now, you joined the live stream of the Barryton demonstration on September 16th, 2019, did you not?
Yes, I watched that live stream.
And in your own words, you said that you tend to make commentary when you join live streams, like the one in Australia. Is that right?
Yes, I did small encouraging things like good job.
You had the ability to increase the volume of the speakers at either end of the broadcast. Is that right?
Yes, I can do that on all live streams because it's for security reasons.
After Wesley Everett's attack on the statue, were you the one who told Britt Smithson to hold a press conference distancing Wesley Everett from debunking this story?
Yes, because Wesley Everett acted totally not following what DEMIT stands for.
And you were the one to issue this order?
Yes, I told Britt Smithson to.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Okay, any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Does the defense have any other witnesses?
No, Your Honor.
All right, the parties ready for closing arguments?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay,
Defense is ready, Your Honor.
all right. Prosecution, you may give your closing argument.
Good evening, members of the jury. What happened on September 16 was a tragedy, but make no mistake, it was not an accident. It was planned and orchestrated. Today, we're here to answer one question: who is really behind this and who encouraged this? Members of the jury, Tracy Whitney intended to cause malicious destruction. Tracy Whitney conspired, acting as an accomplice in organizing these crimes. Tracy Whitney was the great encourager, knowing members Britt Smithson and Wesley Everett would follow the plan to destroy property, even if anyone gets injured in the process. The state has fulfilled its burden beyond any reasonable doubt. we ask that you find Tracy Whitney guilty of malicious mischief and assault as an accomplice and guilty of criminal conspiracy to commit these crimes. The court has given you the law to follow for accomplice liability. In Instruction 9, during Instruction 9 tells you that a person is legally accountable for the conduct of another, here being the property damage and assault Wesley Everett has been convicted of, if with knowledge that it will promote or facilitate the commission of the crime. The person aids another in planning the crime. In other words, any assistance, whether given by words or encouragement or presence. And just a reminder, Wesley Everett commit crimes caused substantial bodily harm to another and caused over 10,000 of property damage. You heard that from Del Hubbard and Mayor Grimm. This case is a history of Tracy Whitney directly and personally encouraging Wesley Everett to commit property damage, with many chats and many emails and encrypted messages. And not to worry if any person was to sacrifice in the process, because as a DMIT's mission states, any person in the way when the destruction happens must be swept aside with the statute. Sacrifice yourself and others. The defendant's words to Wesley Everett just before the protest began. The defendant gave words of encouragement, knowing Wesley Everett would accomplish the conduct which constitutes the crimes. That, members of the jury, is accomplice liability under Jury Instruction 9. Next, defendant Tracy Whitney is guilty of conspiracy. Jury Instruction 8 tells us that 3 elements of conspiracy. 1, defendant agreed with one or more person to conduct constituting a crime. 2, the defendant intended for the conduct to be performed. And 3, that any member of the agreement took a substantial step in furtherance. Both Wesley Everett and Detective Bramberg, an expert in an organization, use of phrases to accomplish secret goals, told you about the private encrypted conversations about Blockhouse and Energetic Tango, a phrase to signal the comments of destruction by forceful actions, all in the name of debunking Miss Story, the defendant's organization. You also heard from Wesley Everett that Tracy Whitney wanted the Alton Barrington statue brought down by any means necessary. You heard from Detective Bramberg that Tracy Whitney intended for the need for violent force. You heard from Britt Smithson that Tracy Whitney offered words of encouragement and that Britt didn't agree with Tracy Whitney's philosophy, which was to destroy all statues. Britt Smithson also told us that Tracy Whitney called for the meeting to discuss the next moves and mentioned physical effort must have a purpose and achieve a goal. Also during the protest, they heard Tracy Whitney's voice over the tablet right before Wesley Everett damaged the statue. Robin Hess will try to confuse you and tell you that Tracy Whitney's words were protected by the First Amendment and that her speech was lawless and imminent. Hess tried to claim that the words used by Tracy Whitney showed lawless and imminent speech. However, you heard from Bramberg that Tracy Whitney called for the need for force, violence, and that it would be near. You heard from Lynn Strong how they never met Tracy Whitney and their only access to debunking Miss Story was through Britt Smithson. One thing they are for certain is right before Wesley Everett damaged the statue, they saw Tracy Whitney's face appear on the live stream, and it seemed like something was to be shouted. Members of the jury, Tracy Whitney was the great encourager in chief to all of Wesley Everett's crimes. The encourager who got Wesley and Britt to agree to a protest to destroy the statue and harm anyone if they get in the way because the time for talk is over. Who got Wesley Everett to agree to direct action and who got Wesley Everett to take steps in furtherance of the conduct which institutes these crimes. We ask that you come to a verdict of guilty on all counts. Thank you.
Thank you. Defense, you may give your closing argument.
Members of the jury, on September 16th, 2019, Wesley Everett picked up the cold, hard metal of that sledgehammer, and the statue of Alton Berry came tumbling down, injuring an innocent bystander, Del Hubbard. Today, the prosecution had the burden of proving that Tracy Whitney was guilty of criminal conspiracy and that he was an accomplice in malicious mischief in the first degree and assault in the second degree. The prosecution had to prove these things beyond a reasonable doubt. They have not done so. If the prosecution cannot prove that Tracy Whitney was an accomplice, then Tracy Whitney cannot be held responsible for the damages to the statue or to the injuries of Del Hubbard. In order to prove that Tracy Whitney was an accomplice, the prosecution had to prove jury instruction number 9, that he solicited, commanded, or encouraged Wesley Everett to commit the crime, or that he aided or agreed to aid Wesley Everett in the planning or committing of the crime. The prosecution painted the picture that Whitney was a puppet master, but in reality, there were no strings being pulled here. The fact of the matter is, Tracy Whitney did not command or encourage Wesley Everett to commit any crime, nor did he help or plan with Wesley Everett to commit these crimes. On September 16th, 2019, Wesley Everett went rogue. You've heard from Britt Smithson, who testified about Everett's extremist tendencies in the past, going on tangents during DMITE meetings to the point where DMITE did not even want to invite him to the meeting with Mayor Grimm because of his tendency to get extremely aggressive. Even then, he had a potential to go rogue. Now, focusing on the day of the protest, you just heard the prosecution say that Tracy Whitney appeared on a tablet screen and at full volume screamed a signal to Everett. But earlier today, you heard from the prosecution witness, Del Hubbard, that it was much too loud to hear the voice or voices on the device. And throughout everyone's testimonies, Wesley Everett was the only person who clearly heard the supposed signal. Wesley Everett was the only person who acted upon that signal, hitting the statue 3 times. Wesley Everett was the only person who acted violently that day. Wesley Everett went rogue. Britt Smithson, who Everett claims was his closest ally within this group, was shocked to see Everett climb up onto the statue. In fact, Aileen Strong testified as though it looked as if it took him totally by surprise. While Everett claims that Smithson and everyone in the inner circle knew this was taking place, Britt's surprise did not come out of nowhere. It was initiated by Everett going rogue. We've heard a lot about the things that Tracy Whitney wrote and said, but keep in mind that everyone in America has the right to free speech. Robert Hess, an expert in the workings of the First Amendment, clarified this for us. He told us about the Brandenburg test, the standard for determining what constitutes as free speech. In order for Whitney's statements to be considered free speech, there cannot be intent for imminent action. These actions cannot be imminent, and there cannot be a likelihood that these actions will occur. What we have seen over and over again throughout this case is that Tracy Whitney's words lacked that imminence. You can see this in Exhibit 3, the wanted posters, which you heard the prosecution say was proof that Whitney was dead set on creating violence. Alton Berry statue taken down by any means necessary. By any means necessary does not have a given timeline or a date. These events could be taking place in 18 years or in 2 seconds. No imminence, no conspiracy. The same is true of Exhibit number 4, the letter from Whitney to Merrill Grimm, which the prosecution also said was proof. They focused on the statement, immediate compliance will avoid any unpleasant consequences for Barrington, its facilities, and its employees. If we use the Brandenburg test, though, you can clearly see that this statement is not imminent because it has no real timeline of when these events would be taking place. No imminence, no conspiracy. This is also shown in Exhibit number 2 on the DMITE website. You just heard the prosecution say that the edited quotes from Thoreau were also proof of Whitney's violent intent. But once again, this is just a general statement with no given timeline. No imminence, no conspiracy. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, may I remind you that much of the prosecution's case relies on Wesley Everett's testimony alone. But remember that Everett has pled guilty to 3 criminal charges, and his sentencing for those charges is still pending. The severity of those sentences will depend on this case. Jury Instruction 5 tells you that you should use great caution when considering any words from Wesley Everett. Members of the jury, the prosecution had a burden to meet. They needed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Whitney was part of a conspiracy, and acting through Wesley Everett, he intentionally damaged the statue of Alton Berry and assaulted Del Hubbard. Since they have failed to show that Tracy Whitney was an accomplice, they have not met that burden. We are asking you, the jury, to return a verdict of not guilty on all charges.
Thank you, counsel. Prosecution, you have 2-minute rebuttal.
Thank you, Honor. Members of the jury, the defense will try to pin this on Wesley Everett and claim that Wesley Everett went rogue. But it was indeed Tracy Whitney who was behind this all. And what Wesley Everett did was all in the name of debunking mystery. Statute wanted, statute taken down by any means necessary. Deemit members, do your duty. We have the justifications for the action we need. The time for talk is almost over. Bring the hammer down tomorrow. These are just some of the quotes from the defendant. Members of the jury, ask yourself who is really pulling the strings here. Find Tracy Whitney guilty of all counts. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, I think procedurally now the raters are required to fill in their scoring forms and turn them in electronically. And then only after all of the raters have done that are we then allowed to meet for about 15 minutes